Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of NHLN Opinion Plus, a weekly series airing every Friday. This is a space for our opinions where we talk about current events and questions the Latino community is curious about. Today, we're joined by Maria Devlin, President and CEO of Families in Transition New Horizons. Maria was appointed in June of 2020 and has over 30 years of experience working with nonprofit organizations. Also joining us today is Chief External Relations Officer Stephanie Savard. Welcome, Maria and Stephanie. Thank you for joining us this week.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So to start, could you tell our audience a little bit about Families in Transition and how the organization started and their mission?
Since I'm the new one here, I'm actually going to ask Stephanie to start answering that question because she has the longevity with the organization.
Sure. So Families in Transition has been an organization since 1991, and it is a nonprofit that really provides an array of services and housing, emergency shelter, an entire continuum of housing and shelter to support individuals and families across the state who are struggling with homelessness or at risk of homelessness. And it really was created because we were starting to see increased numbers of individuals and families in need in our state that are experiencing homelessness. So making sure that we have the response in the 4 locations that we are located to be able to support those that are most vulnerable in our communities.
And Maria, do you have anything to add to that?
I think I've been in New Hampshire for my entire life, and Families in Transition has been an important part of all of our communities to help those who are the most vulnerable. It's an organization that really takes home to heart because that's our point of being here, is to make sure that people have a home where they feel safe and where they can live the life that they want to lead.
So it seems that your mission with Fitnh isn't just to give people. I found that one of the things with Fitnh is that your aim isn't just to give people time and place to recover, but also to tackle the root causes of homelessness. What do you think sets Fitnh apart from other organizations that are combating homelessness?
I'll start. So I think what sets us apart, and Stephanie touched on this in the very beginning, is really providing the continuum of care for people who are experiencing homelessness. So we have the expertise and the skills to take somebody who is perhaps living in their car or living in other places that really are uninhabitable for humans to be sleeping and living, and bring them through a variety of stages of recovery from homelessness. So for adults, that is sometimes going to our adult shelter to become stable and then potentially move on to more permanent housing as they become more stable. And that's true for families, that's true for individuals, it's true for everyone that we work with. So I think that sets us apart because we're able to help people in different stages of homelessness because it's a journey.
I see that. And how do you think the pandemic has brought about new difficulties in this kind of holistic approach?
Boy, the pandemic has a pretty significant impact on our community and the folks that we serve. You know, the way that homeless services were provided prior to the pandemic were really the worst case scenario of how do you respond to something so significant like an infectious disease of that magnitude. A lot of our emergency shelters were designed in more congregate settings with large numbers of people, which is important to respond to homelessness to make sure that they're not on the streets. But it suddenly became that we needed to adjust how we did emergency sheltering, especially in our adult emergency shelter here in Manchester. Suddenly having 138 people in one space was not ideal in the middle of a pandemic. So we had to be really pretty versatile in our response. And creative. How we provided case management became very different, making sure our staff and our participants had the proper PPE, and doing a pretty significant decompression of our emergency shelters so that we didn't have that large number together, and making sure that we had resources for everybody that we served to quarantine, to isolate if needed, and to be able to do everything that you and I could do being in a home, but living in a homeless situation. So I had to be very creative in a pandemic.
I'm sure. And then, Maria, looking back at around June last year, what was it like settling into your new position as CEO right at the beginning of the pandemic?
Yeah, certainly an interesting time to make a career change, but it actually allowed me a lot of time to get to know our staff and our programs in a very different way. I was able to really spend a lot more time internally working with our staff, working with Stephanie and our leadership team on what did we need to accomplish that day and that week. And it allowed us to really look inward before I needed to look externally, which is really much of what a president and CEO does, is working with the external environment and the partners that we have. But I was able to focus internally to make sure, like Stephanie said, that our participants were having all the priority that they needed, that our staff felt safe and were very comfortable. So it was an interesting time to make a career change, but it was also probably one of the best times because I was able to meet people, and even by Zoom, it was interesting to get to know a lot of people in that way instead of face to face.
Yeah, I'm sure you kind of had to hit the ground running there. And so, in my understanding, the services provided by FITNH are divided into two main categories: an outpatient substance use treatment center and life skills development. Can you tell our audience a little bit more about these services and what they look like for the people using them?
Yeah, we really provide quite an array of supportive services and clinical services that people can access. And so the life skills part is really making sure that our participants have access to a case manager to be able to work on whatever root causes of homelessness brought them to that situation. So that may be focusing on health, domestic violence, it may be behavioral health, budgeting, parenting, you name it. And so really having access to case management to wrap around that individual or the family to provide all of the support that's needed as they settle into their new homes or as they're managing being homeless in an emergency shelter. The substance use treatment program that you referred to is a resource that's actually available to anybody in the community. You don't have to just be a homeless individual. And so folks can access our substance use treatment program. That's an intensive outpatient and outpatient services specifically for substance use. So if somebody is struggling with alcohol or drug addiction, they can reach out to the Willows Treatment Center, and anybody that's in our programs obviously can access support there as well. And then I would also want to add that we also have a food program that is connected to our agency as well. And the food program is also opened, the food pantry is open to anybody in the Manchester community that has, that is feeling and is experiencing food insecurity. And so it's able to get folks the food they need through very amazing, nutritious foods to access and bringing back to their homes. But it also provides food to all of the emergency shelters and residential programs that we have called transitional living programs to be able to provide nutritious meals 3 times a day to those individuals and families as well.
And so, how would you say these services have adapted over the course of the pandemic in terms of people seeking out help and how you help them?
So we, like Stephanie said earlier, we adapted to a lot of the changes due to the pandemic. Some of the biggest changes we made were in the food pantry. Our food pantry was located within one of our other programs previously, and we had to go to a model where anyone who wanted to come and pick up a food basket needed to call and make an appointment. That was for the our safety for our staff, as well as for the safety of the person who was coming to pick up food. So that was a huge shift in how we had delivered food prior. Now at our new food pantry location on Lake Ave in Manchester, people can make an appointment still, or they can just walk in, but basically every day between the hours of 9 and 2, and pick out some of the food that they think works for their family. It's still very socially distant, and we have to be really careful about those things, but all of our programs have had to adapt. Our outreach into the camps have had to adapt. Our case managers did a lot of telehealth over the course of the year. Instead of going into a family's home, we actually would call them and try and Zoom with them if they had that capability. So we adapted based on what we could and couldn't do during the pandemic.
And did you see much of an increase in people looking to use your services during the course of the pandemic?
We did in a variety of ways. When the pandemic first hit, the substance use treatment center had a lull, right? Because everybody was encouraged, stay in your home, stay where you are. So it really depends on the programs that you're looking at. In that first initial couple months, even our family shelter wasn't having as many referrals. There's an eviction moratorium that's been in place since the beginning of the pandemic. And that has actually sort of slowed down a little bit the referrals to for example, our family shelter. But at the same time, because we had to decompress the emergency shelter for adults in Manchester, as we approached winter, we were definitely struggling with meeting the numbers of individuals who needed that support for shelter in the winter time. So needed to open up 2 additional winter shelters to meet the needs of the numbers. And they were higher at that time than the usual number we have pre-pandemic. Not unusual to get larger numbers in the winter in New Hampshire. But at the same time, knowing that there clearly was more individuals who were suddenly not able to stay doubled up. When you're living on someone's couch because you're able to, with a family or a friend or a neighbor, and suddenly you're hearing from the government, don't have people in your home, isolate, quarantine and social distance, you're going to ask those folks to leave. And suddenly people were ending up homeless that had been able to stay on somebody's couch for a period of time. So we did see increases. It kind of went in waves over time. And we're continuing to keep that kind of consistent numbers at this point as we're sort of coming out of the pandemic. We do worry about, will there be an increase in numbers when the eviction moratorium is lifted, and how that's going to impact homelessness going forward.
Thank you for that. So next, I just want to talk a little bit about how the organization accounts for varying identities of unhoused people, such as how the needs of an LGBTQ youth may be very different to that of, say, a single mother. In your opinion, why might it be crucial for organizations such as the FITNH to focus on the different identities of its participants?
You want to take that, Maria?
Yeah.
Here's the reality. We have to meet participants where they're at and who they are. And for us, in order to do that, it's really understanding what they're bringing forward, what they identify with. We need to make sure that our staff are properly trained in understanding and culturally competent response to any population that is in front of us. And so, you use 2 really great examples. How we work with a mom with children should be different than how we're working maybe with a younger adult who identifies as LGBTQ. And so it's really important that not only our staff have the proper training, but that our participants understand that it is a safe place to be able to be who they are, so that we can meet them where they're at and provide the best and most responsive support services to meet their needs.
And Maria, would you like to add anything to that?
I think it's really important that, as Stephanie said, that as an organization, we're still learning. We're an organization that does have many years of history, but certainly can learn from the communities around us and from every single community that we serve. So we need to be open to asking questions, learning from our participants. And again, like Stephanie said, finding out what their needs are and not trying to change where people want to go, just helping them make sure that they are able to have some type of stability. And usually that does start with making sure somebody has a safe place to lay their head every single night. And so we work with a lot of partners in order to make sure that we are helping to meet the needs of different populations. So you mentioned youth, for example. Families in Transition does not think any youth who is experiencing homelessness should be in our adult shelter. It does happen, but somebody who has a challenge of homelessness when they're 18 or 19 is very different than a person experiencing homelessness at the ages of 40 and 50. And so there we work with partners who are more apt to work with youth who have more specialty training and expertise in that area, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, all of that. So we need to make sure we're working with our partners to help ensure that, again, like Stephanie said, we're meeting our participants where they are.
Of course. So lastly here, just wrapping up some final questions. What are some different ways people can get involved and support FIDNH?
Yeah, we need our community to do the work that we do. We rely on them in so many creative ways. There are a multitude of volunteer opportunities, and we've made adjustments as we've needed to for the pandemic. And as we come out of the pandemic, are looking forward to getting back to even more volunteer opportunities. But people can come in, they can support our food pantry, they can work in our Outfitters thrift store. There's a lot of creative ways, both for individuals, for families, for groups to get involved, very hands-on within any of our programs across the organization. And then in addition to volunteering, if someone doesn't have the gift of time, sometimes they have the gift of items. And so it may be that someone can donate food to our food pantry. And we have a list on our website that says sort of what our high food needs are. But we also have lists that are specific to supporting our shelters or our other housing programs with brand new items that are in much needed areas. So for example, in the wintertime, that's often things like mittens or hats or socks. And so there's a list of essential items, high need items that people can go to do drives or to just purchase a few items and bring them to our locations to support our programs. We're always looking for support in those areas. And then finally, if you're in the Manchester area, to be able to donate to Outfitters Thrift Store when you're cleaning out those closets for the spring or the winter time, to bring your donations there so that we can then sell those items and be able to support the organization with the proceeds and make sure that the individuals that we serve have access to those items as well for what they need.
Those all sound great. Thank you so much. And is there any other last information, news, or resources you guys would like to share with the audience?
We should probably tell folks our website so they can check us out further. It's fitnh.com. So feel free to reach out and dig into the website to learn more. We really appreciate that.
I'd also add that there is a state of homelessness report done by the New Hampshire Coalition to End Homelessness. And that's a report that you could also get on our website, or you could look just up on your web browser, New Hampshire Coalition to End Homelessness, and that information should come up. There's a lot of great information about homelessness, where we were last year and where we're heading. That report is actually written by Stephanie and her team. And I think it provides a lot of good information about where we are in the state of New Hampshire.
And I think I said the wrong website. It's fitnh.org, just to clarify.
No worries, and we'll be sure to add the links in.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for talking with us today, Mrs. Devlin and Ms. Savard, and for being our guest on NHLN Opinion Plus.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's an honor.
Thank you. Tune in next week for another episode. Follow us on Twitter at NH_Latino_News and Instagram at NH_Latino News. I'm Diego Villarreal with NHLN Opinion Plus. See you next time.